Hi, my name is Ichan, and you are listening to the JudgeHub podcast.
Welcome to the JudgeHub podcast. Today we'll go through some highlights of the Heavy Hitters release notes.
In this episode, Shay and I are joined by a special guest, our neighbor from the Canadian prairies, Grant Bartel from the Rules team. Welcome to the show, Grant.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Grant, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into it?
Sure. I've been playing Flesh and Blood since basically the beginning of Tales of Aria. I joined the judge program at the first set of tests, and since then I've been fairly active in the judge Discord, and I joined the rules team when it was first established. Some of the other highlights I've had is I was part of the Comprehensive Rules 2.0 rewrite, and I've found a few of the different loopholes that have existed in the rules and helped patch those out.
Yeah, and I like to say if I had one lifeline for $1 million to get a rules question right, Grant would be pretty much at the top of my list for who I'd phone. So Grant, make sure your phone's always on, just in case. Let's get into these release notes now and everything new about Heavy Hitters. So we'll start with the new keywords, then the new heroes, then we'll highlight some cards that may trip people up because there's something new. For the people that are watching on video, we'll have the card shown. For anyone that's just listening, we will be reading out the effect of each card or new keyword, but we're not going to exhaustively go through each point. So let's start with the new abilities. And Shay, do you want to lead us off with the first one?
Yeah, sure. The first new ability is Beat Chest, and it reads, as an additional cost to play this, you may discard a card with 6 or more power. The reason we chose this one was because you were only considered to have beaten chest if you paid the additional cost from the Beat Chest ability. You have not beaten chest if you've only discarded due to other effects or other costs.
Yeah, it's really similar to how you're not considered to have charged in Bolton if you just have put a card in your soul from an effect that doesn't say charge. Very similar type of thing here with Beat Chest.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I think it'll help people remember how it works because I think a lot of us are familiar with how charge works.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Grant?
No, I think you've covered this one fairly well. Charge is the exact mirror thing to bring up for it.
This one was too simple for Grant. So you want to take us through the next?
Sure. So the next one we have is Clash. So clashing heroes reveal the top card of their deck, and then the hero with the card with the greatest power wins. So there are a couple of different things of note for this one. There are some effects that will modify cards in deck that will affect this. The big example here being Caia. However, anything that affects a card you control will not affect this because you do not control any cards that are in your deck.
Right.
The other big ones are if you reveal a card that does have power and your opponent that has the power characteristic, and your opponent reveals it without the power characteristic, you will win the clash, even if the power of the card you reveal is 0.
Yeah, I can see that coming up in, or at least thinking about Guardian decks. Rouse the Ancients is one card that was fairly common in Guardian. I'm not sure if that's going to be true for Victor and Constructed, but yeah, it's a little bit new just to think that, hey, even if I flip a Rouse the Ancients that has 0 power, it still wins if my opponent flips over a non-attack or an instant or something like that.
Yep, Rouse beats Kano and Clash.
I wanted to bring up one other point that you kind of talked about there, controlling cards. So are text boxes on cards essentially blank while they're in any zone other than the arena, or is that when you control them?
So the text box of cards are blank in a majority of the time if they're not in the arena. There are some exceptions to this rule, primarily when cards specifically say so, or for cards that have a star in their power. This is a characteristic defining ability. Those are always active. For control, you only control cards while they are on the stack or in the arena. In all other zones, no one is considered to control the card.
Perfect, thank you.
So that would impact things like Channel Mount Heroic, right? Like if you're Briar, you have Channel Mount Heroic and you flip a card off the top, it doesn't gain the power.
Yeah, Channel Mount Heroic, Art of War, Blood Rush Bellow, any of those will not affect cards in your deck.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Anything else about Clash? And of course, we'll cover anything specific to certain heroes or certain cards when we go through those. All good. Let's move on to the next. Shay, do you want to walk us through the next one?
Yeah, the next one is Guardwell. When the combat chain closes, if this is defended, put a -1 counter on it equal to its defense.
Yeah, it's the first time seeing this mechanic.
Yeah, there are some things that are actually fairly similar to this one. So Shred will actually affect temper equipment. So in Temper's case, even if a card had more defense before the Shred, after it will have 0 and will be destroyed when the combat chain ends. In Guardwell's case, Guardwell's defense is lowered, so it will get less -1 defense counters, so you will be able to block with it again at a later time.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So if you're an assassin and you want your opponent to be able to block with their Guardwell equipment again, you should shred it. It's the opposite of temper. Okay. The next one's pretty fun. Grant, do you want to go through that one?
Sure. This one is universal. So while in any zone, the card is the same class as your hero. So there are a couple small things to highlight with this one. The first is the card only gains the class, not the talent of your hero. If you're running this in Phi, it is a ninja card. It's not draconic. The other one is that if an effect results in a card with universal to lose its class types, it does not lose its class types. Example, Erase Face. The key thing here is that lose and cannot gain are two different effects. Lose means that a card will lose any of its base abilities. Cannot gain means it cannot gain any abilities from any effects. Universal being an ability here that would cause it to gain the class.
Well, that's really interesting, Grant. And just one question about Universal. Is the card also considered generic, or does it lose generic and become your class?
So generic isn't actually a class. Okay. Generic is the absence of classes.
Interesting. Anything from you, Shay?
Nope.
I was really holding out hope for a hero with the type generic, but you've just you've killed those hopes.
Squash that for ever happening.
All right, let's go into the next one. Shay?
Yeah, the next one is Wager. When the attack's chain link resolves, if the attack hit, you create a token, so might, agility, or vigor, or gold. Otherwise, they create a token. Or otherwise, sorry, your opponent creates a token.
So, yeah, the key thing here is that Wager is not an on-hit effect. It is a when the chain link resolves effect. There are a couple special situations here that will only come up in very unique situations so far. So there is currently only one attack that can attack multiple heroes, Apocalypse Automaton. You need to combine that with some effect that allows it to wager. For this purpose, let's assume money where your mouth is. If you play money where your mouth is, then play Apocalypse Automaton, you'll be attacking up to 3 heroes in a UPF game. you create a separate wager with each of those. So you're basically going, I'm betting I can hit you, I'm betting I can hit you, I'm betting I can hit the third person.
Mm-hmm.
When the chain link resolves, each of those bets is evaluated separately. If I hit the first person, didn't hit the second person because they blocked out, and hit the third person, I will create 2 gold, and the second person will create 1 gold because they won their side of their bet. Each wager created this way will count towards the total number of times the attack is wagered. Is basically saying up the ante, counts that as 3.
Okay.
Nice. That seems
Currently, that is the only thing that cares about that.
Perfect.
That's
Thank you.
that's a future judge exam question right here. Like, all right.
Yeah, that is one of those situations that I believe could only come up in Yorick games.
The rules have to cover every single situation, right? That's,
yeah, yeah. It is a Yorick game that a person who has Evos got it up the ante and a wager card in their hand.
Right.
Has this happened to you? If so, please send a picture of your board state. I want to see. Right. Let's move on to the new heroes. So we'll start with the one-armed brute, Caia, armed and dangerous. I will take this one. Caia is a brute hero, or young brute hero. The adult version has 40 health and 4 intellect. The young version has 20 health and 4 intellect. And his text reads, you have 1 weapon zone. Attack action cards you own get +1 power while they are in any zone other than the combat chain. The first time you discard a card with 6 or more power during each of your action phases, create a might token. This is pretty cool. The first hero that I think we've seen with just 1 arm. So I guess, Grant, what makes Caia a little bit special because of that?
Yeah, so the special thing about Caia is that he does have only 1 arm. So he is allowed to, at the start of the game, he's allowed to equip either one-handed weapon or an off-handed weapon, or theoretically a quiver if there were any he was allowed to run. He cannot run a 2-handed weapon, and he cannot run 2 one-handed weapons or a one-handed weapon and an offhand. Just simply because he only has the 1 weapon zone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's say I'm feeling a little bit precocious on the day of a tournament. Would I be allowed to register a 2-handed weapon in my deck list?
You would be allowed to write it on your deck list. However, if you ever actually include it in your choices to bring into the game, then that is a penalty, and I believe it's a presenting cards error.
Presenting cards error. Yep. It's don't register a romping club with adult Caia. All right. Let's move on to the next hero, Betsy. Shay, do you want to read this one?
Sure, yeah. Betsy, skin in the game, or just Betsy. She's a guardian hero with 4 intellect and 40 health or 20 health. And she reads, whenever an attack you control wagers, you may pay 2 resources. If you do, the attack gets +1 and overpower. And one of the things that we wanted to highlight here was that if an attack wagers 2 or more times, Betsy's effect will trigger each wager made. The attack gets +1 power and overpower for each time you trigger and choose to pay 2 resources.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Of note, adding multiple instances of overpower don't affect anything. So the main thing from the second one is just the +1 power.
Yeah, it's nice and simple.
Very good. You get this one, Grant.
Sure. Victor Goldman, High and Mighty, or just Victor Goldman. He's a guardian hero, and young for the regular one. 4 intellect, 40 HP, 20 when young. The first time each turn that you create a gold token from an effect you control, you'll draw a card. And the first time each turn you would fail to win a clash, instead, you may destroy a gold you control. If you do, put one of the revealed cards on the bottom of its owner's deck, then clash again. For this one, there are a couple of different things that we want to highlight. The first is that if an opponent wagers or clashes with you and you create a gold from that effect, you will not, Victor's first ability will not trigger because you do not control the effect. That is one of the keys for him. You have to be the person that creates the gold in order to draw. Second, if you were to create a gold during the start of the game, during the start of game procedure as Victor, for example, Crown of Dominion, you will not draw a card from his triggered ability. There are actually two different reasons why this, or one reason why you don't draw from it, and a second why it wouldn't matter even if you did. The reason why you don't get to draw is all the triggers resolving at the start of the game happen before the first turn actually happens, so it isn't either player's turn. And the second reason why, even if you did, you wouldn't get a 5-card hand, is that you draw your hand size after those triggers resolve.
No, that's really interesting. I've never thought about, the start of game procedure to this level of detail. So I'm glad that people like you are in the weeds, all phases of the game. Now, one question that I'm a little bit afraid to ask you is, what happens if there are two victors in a clash and they tie, so they both don't win?
So the victor that is the turn player will get to decide the order that both of the replacement effects get applied in. Whenever any replacement effects occur, this is always the case that it is. And each of these different replacement effects will try to be applied a single time. So if the first victor to have their ability go off does destroy a gold, you'll redo the clash, and the results might be the same, or one player might win. If the second player would be winning, too bad they don't get to do their ability anymore because they're already winning. If they were losing after this, they would still get the opportunity. If the first player passed on their opportunity to destroy a gold, then the second player would be the only would get an opportunity, and regardless of the choice they made, the first player would not get the opportunity again.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Gambler's Gloves situation as well. This one may be a little bit more common than Double Gambler's Gloves, but yeah, the fun of multiple replacement effects.
Yeah, I think we're going to get used to this one in the next upcoming weeks.
Very good. Okay, let's move along to the next hero, which is Caia. So Caia of the Golden Sand, or just Caia. She is a warrior hero and young hero. 4 intellect and 40 life at adult, and 20 life young. And her text reads, if you've drawn a card this turn, your sword attacks cost 1 resource less to activate. Once per turn action, banish 2 red and 2 yellow cards from your graveyard. The next time a weapon you control hits a hero this turn, create a gold token and go again. So the one thing that we wanted to highlight here with Caia is to clarify that non-attack actions, reactions, and instants do go to the graveyard immediately. They're not stuck on the combat chain, even though it is fairly common for players to leave them on the chain, even reactions on the chain link that they got played in. This could be relevant for Caaia's ability. If you're wondering, do I have the red and yellow cards in the graveyard? Make sure you don't forget about the cards that you're leaving out on the board. And the last hero is pretty straightforward. Shay, do you want to just read it?
Yeah. It's Olympia Prizefighter, or Olympia at Young. It's a 4 intellect hero with 40 and 20 health. And he simply reads, the first time each of your attacks win a wager, create a gold token. I don't know if there's much more to add to that. Grant, do you have anything?
The only thing of note is if you wager multiple times on a single attack, you get 1 gold. If multiple different attacks each hit and have wagered, you will get a gold for each.
Let's move on to the cards. So we'll go roughly in order, and again, just spotlighting the cards that are bringing something new or something that could be a little bit tricky for a judge making a call here. So the first one is Apex Bonebreaker. And Grant, would you like to read this one to us?
Sure. Apex Bonebreaker is a brute equipment arms with 2 defense. When this defends together with a card with 6 or more power, create a might token. Temper. So the main things for this one is it must be declared as defending at the same time as a card with 6 power. In the case of defending with this and then activating an Amulet of Haven Call, it will not trigger because they're defending at 2 separate times. However, in the theoretical that there was a 6 power card that you could defend for another player using, I'm blanking on the name of that keyword.
Brevant with
Chivalry.
Chivalry is the name of the card.
Oh, Protect.
Protect. Yes. Yeah. Those are considered to be defending at the same time. So if there was a 6 power with Protect, it would work.
Okay, cool.
That's a little bit non-intuitive, I must say, because it's happening at a slightly different time, but
it is still considered the same time. This is also why all of the Unity... What is that card's name?
United We Stand. And
United We Stand actually functions.
Ah, got it. Now that makes sense. I guess another thing is how does this interact with KO's text to give all of his cards off the combat chain +1 power?
So it doesn't. Cards that are defending are on the combat chain, so they will not be getting his power boost.
Okay. There's no millisecond in time when okay.
Nope.
It's moving from hand to combat chain.
Just had to ask, okay. And just a note from the release notes, there are 2 words here, the juice. So Grant, you're part of the rules team. I need you to clarify, what is the juice and how does this help?
That is a question that we have asked Josh a couple of times and haven't gotten a response for.
Okay.
Interesting.
I guess we'll move on.
Peel that one out of him sometime.
Shay, got the next one?
Yeah, the next one is Knucklehead. It's a brute equipment head. It has 2 defense. It is a KO specialization. And it reads, action, destroy this. Roll a 6-sided die. Until end of turn, your base intellect is the number rolled. One of the things that we wanted to highlight was that this effect applies before any other effects that increase or decrease your hero's intellect. An example is Nourishing Emptiness. One of the other things was if your base intellect is increased by this effect and then another effect causes a hero to become a copy of your hero, Shiana, that copy of your hero would only have the unmodified intellect of your hero. So you would get 4 intellect.
Okay. Next one is Send Packing. Grant, do you want to take this?
Sure. Send Packing is a brute action attack that comes only in yellow. Costs 3 resources, has 6 power and 3 defense. When this attacks a hero, banish a card from their arsenal. When the chain link resolves, if this didn't hit, return the banished card to its owner's hand. So a couple things of note for this one is that the card is banished face up. This means that any text on the card is active, both players get to see it. So if the card is playable from banish at instant speed, it could be played now. Couple shadow options in that kind of category.
That's pretty cool.
If the combat chain somehow closes before the chain link resolved, then the delayed triggered effect doesn't trigger and the card will remain banished. Could matter in some Yorick games if you give it Phantasm, or if there's any other ways to close it after it has started attacking. And if the banished card is turned face down while it's in the banished zone, the banished card will not return to its owner's arsenal. So Figment of Judgment, Blasmophet, any card banished by Blasmophet, Leviathan Consumed will automatically get flipped face down. So those cards will never return.
Grant, can you remind me why you can't play cards from Banish that are face down, but you can face up cards?
Face down cards don't have any properties.
Perfect.
And just to reiterate,
they technically do have properties. None of them are active. If in the theoretical world that a card said it could be played while banished face down, then sure it could. If otherwise, they need to be face up.
Okay. That makes sense. And just to reiterate, the reason why the banished card is turned face up, even though the card text itself does not explicitly say flip the card over, it's because the banished zone is a public zone, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and by default, you return the cards, to the default state. Intimidate specifically says face down, which will make it an exception. Yeah. Okay. The next card is Sho Mercy. I'll read this one out. It is a brute action attack. It comes only in red. It has 6 power. It costs 3 resources. It has 3 defense. It's a Rhinar specialization. And it says, when this attacks a hero, intimidate them. If the defending hero has no cards in hand, this gets 3 power. So the reason we wanted to highlight this one is because it's always checking. It's not a single point in time when this attacks, this gets 3 power. It's constantly checking to see if the defending hero has no cards in hand. And as soon as that hero does, for whatever reason, then it gets the +3 power. I think some players and judges get the 2 different types of effects mixed up. Yes, some are, when this attacks, gain power, and some others are always checking, like this card. Anything else on Sho Mercy?
No, I think you covered it perfectly.
Cast Bones. Grant?
Sure. Cast Bones. Brute action, red, 0 resources, 3 defense. Reveal the top 6 cards of your deck. Create a might token for each card with 6 or more power revealed this way. Put the revealed cards on top of your deck in a random order. If you control 6 or more might tokens, create an agility tokens. So the big thing we wanted to make sure everyone is aware of for this one is that when you put the revealed cards back on top in a random order, no one gets to know the order. If you know the order, it's not random.
Yep.
Yeah, lots of questions surrounding that.
That's for sure. All right. Shay, you're up.
Sure. The next one is No Fear. It's a brute instant at red, 0 cost. And it reads, as an additional cost to play this, banish any number of cards with 6 or more power from your hand. At the beginning of the end phase, return them to your hand. The next time you would be dealt damage this turn, prevent X of that damage, where X is +2 plus the number of cards banished to play this. So I think for the most part it's pretty simple, but Grant, do you know how this would interact with Vambrace of Determination?
Yeah, it'll just reduce the prevention effect by 1. So instead of preventing X plus 2, it'll prevent X plus 1.
Okay.
So let's pretend that X equals 0, so no fear would theoretically prevent 2. And Kadachi comes in at you. Would that Kadachi do 1 damage, or would it be prevented by the 1 theoretical?
It'll be prevented by the 1 remaining prevention.
Got it. Next card we have here is Miller's Grindstone. So it's a guardian weapon, hammer, one-handed with 4 power. And it says once per turn action, pay 3 resources to attack. When this hits a hero, clash with them. If you win, destroy the top card of their deck. If they win, put a -1 counter on this. So a lot of fun questions about Miller's Grindstone. So Grant, I'm going to send some questions your way. If Miller's Grindstone has 0 power, can you attack with it?
Yes, you can. There is nothing stopping you from attacking with things that have 0 power.
Can the power be negative if I stack up like 6 -1 counters on it?
After the calculations are performed for any power increases or decreases, if the power of a card is less than 0, it is treated as if it was just 0. So if it has 5 counters, it still just has 0 power.
Okay. There's no healing your opponent doing -1 damage.
Nope.
All right. Makes sense. I do have a question. So let's say Miller's Grindstone has 6 -1 counters on it, but its base attack is 4. You attack with it and then red pummel. So if it had no counters on it, it would be for 8, but it has 6 counters on it. So would it subtract first, then add, or would you add then subtract? Like how much power would the hammer have in that case?
You will always do addition before subtraction when modifying numerical values. So it will have 2 power at the end.
Okay.
So it's kind of like Frostbites and attack action cards like Rune Flash that have their costs reduced based on the amount of rune chance?
Yep, exact same principle. Increases are always applied before decreases for those.
Okay. Excellent. And the last reminder to everyone is if your Grindstone has 0 power and your opponent doesn't block, there is no hit. You got to do damage to hit.
Yep.
Shay?
Yeah, the next one is Aurum Aegis. It's a Guardian equipment offhand. It has 2 defense and it's a Victor's specialization. This equipment counts as gold. It also has temper. Yeah, anything else to add to that?
So for that first ability, I think it actually helps if we highlight a couple of specific cards for this. So Starting Stake is one of the examples of something that refers directly to a gold token. It has the text, if you control no gold tokens, create a gold token. So having Aurum Aegis in play does not stop you from creating a gold from Starting Stake. This is treated as a gold. That matters for cards such as Cash In that allow you to pay the alternate cost of destroying your Aurum Aegis to draw the 2 cards.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Gauntlets of Iron Will, and Grant, I hope you're ready to answer some more questions here.
Always.
So Gauntlets of Iron Will reads, Guardian equipment, arms with 2 defense. When this defends, the next time an attack would gain power this chain link, instead it gains that much -1, and it has temper. So, seems straightforward, slightly until I start thinking of different theoretical scenarios. And the first one that came to mind is, let's say Bolton attacks, and Bolton is charged. And the defending hero, a Guardian, would defend with Gauntlets of Iron Will alongside, at the same time, an attack action card. So would Bolton gain power or not in that situation?
In that situation, Bolton will gain the power because Bolton's ability is a static effect that will start applying before the trigger resolves on this card.
Right.
The key thing for this ability is that it is a triggered ability, so it does use the stack. Any effect that buffs the power before that trigger resolves will not be affected. This means things like Art of War can be played while that trigger is on the stack to buff the card. If the trigger has resolved and Art of War is the first thing applied, it will not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just further to your point on Art of War, if the Art of War is successfully, resolved during the defense step, and then the Gauntlets trigger resolves, it doesn't retroactively reduce the power either, right?
Correct.
Perfect. How does this equipment interact with something like Amplifying Arrow that increases the next time an attack would gain power? How does that work?
So this goes back to what we talked about previously of multiple replacement effects being applied at the same time. The turn player gets to choose the order that the replacement effects are applied in. So if Amplifying Arrow's effect is applied first, the power increase will be increased again. So we're going from +1 to +2. And then the Gauntlets will be applied, bringing it back down to +1.
Okay.
If for some reason the turn player decided to have them apply in the opposite order, however, it would be brought from +1 down to 0. It is no longer increasing the power, so Amplifying Arrow's effect no longer applies, and it ends at an increase of +0.
Helps to know the rules in this specific case. Yeah, that's a really cool piece of equipment. I guess anything else come to mind for Gauntlets of Iron Will? Those two examples are what kind of came to my mind.
Just the anecdote that there is a case where Bolton's buff will not apply. There is exactly one. That is our favorite card, Amulet of Haven Call, because it allows you to defend with an attack action during the reaction step after this trigger is resolved.
We need to have a drinking game where every time Amulet of Haven Call is brought up, we all take a drink. That's a good one.
It's amazing.
All right. Next card. Shay, take it away.
Yeah. Next one is Bet Big. It's a Guardian attack action. It's red. It costs 4 resources, has 8 power, and it defends for 3. It is a Betsy specialization. And it simply reads, when this attacks a hero, you may wager a gold, might, and vigor token with them. And just the little thing that we wanted to highlight here is that when you're wagering, it's optional, but if you do decide to wager, you are wagering all 3 tokens. So it's either none or all. You don't get to pick.
Yep. And just slight clarification, it is 1 wager. In the weird case, you somehow get up the ante, Yorick games, etc., etc.
Right. Makes sense.
Let's add that to our drinking game, Yorick.
How often does Yorick come up in rules discussions?
If we ever have a question where we want to ask something weird, like to determine how a rule works, it's normally either assuming we're playing a Yorick game or assuming Taylor if it involves equipment.
Okay.
The more we talk here, Grant, the more I would pay to be a fly on the wall of the rules team Discord. Let's go into the next one. I guess Shay, you got a short one, so you want to do the next two?
You can hit me with another one.
Yeah.
What is it? It's Prime to Fight. It's another Guardian attack action. It is red, costs 5 resources, attacks for 9 power, and has a 3 defense. And if you've controlled a Vigor token this turn, this costs 1 less resource to play. And if you've controlled a Might token this turn, this gets +1 power. So I think it's pretty simple on the surface, but there was one thing that I wanted for clarification, Grant, because this specifically says controlled. If I create a Might or a Vigor token during that turn, and I control one before I play Prime to Fight, does it still see that?
Yes. The wording for this basically means that it doesn't care when you had it. If you currently have it, it works fine. If you had one and it was destroyed, either by its own effect or something else, it will apply.
No, really good. And just a general note about judging, just be prepared for this card, because this is one of those cards which relies on memory of a game state, which may have existed at the start of turn. So for example, if a player enters their turn controlling a Vigor token, then it pops and is destroyed, it is slightly more plausible that a player could forget that they controlled it if they're playing like a non-attack action or if they're activating their equipment. You may need to do some investigations, figure out exactly, mistrigger games rules violations and all of that. Just pay attention to this one. Flesh and Blood is usually pretty good. Usually the information is fairly face up and in front of you. But in this case in particular, you're having to think about what happened in the past, and that's not necessarily on board. Let's go into the next card here. So, Grant, we've been asking you a lot of questions, but why don't you read this one to us?
Sure. The next one is the Golden Sun, S-O-N. It is a Guardian action attack. Yellow, 4 resource with 7 power and 3 defense. It is a Victor specialization. As an additional cost to play this, you may destroy a gold you control. If you do, this gets +3 power and overpower. When you win a clash revealing this, create a gold token. So, couple small things. This cares about destroying a gold. Yes, you can destroy Aurum Aegis for this. The second one is if you fail to win a clash revealing the gold, revealing this, and then you use Victor's ability to replace that clash with a second clash, and you do not reveal the same gold token or the same Golden Sun, you do not get the trigger.
Right.
Because replacement effects mean that the first one never happened.
Yeah, it was replaced. It's in the name. And there's no memory, exactly, is what you're saying. So take that into consideration when using Victor's ability. The next one is Command Respect. So it's a Guardian attack action. It comes in the full cycle. 3 resources to play, 6 power at red, 4 at blue, with 3 defense. And it says, when this hits a hero, if this has power greater than its base, destroy a card in their arsenal. And I should note that this is part of a cycle of multiple cards that say, when this hits a hero, if this has power greater than its base, do X, Y, Z. Just for the purposes of this this discussion, we're only highlighting this one. So a few things we wanted to clarify. This does say when this hits a hero, so it does not trigger if you hit like an ally or something like that. It has to hit a hero. The power is also checked on resolution, not on hit. So there's some pretty cool stuff that you can do with this. Grant, got any examples?
Trying to think of anything special that would actually make sense. There are some things like Art of War that you could do
Art
late.
of War, yeah.
Yeah. The key thing is it does always trigger. I guess some of the more relevant things could be things that can reduce its power. So if it was at 7 power and say a Figment of Tenacity is put into play, its power would be reduced down to 6. The arsenal would not be destroyed.
Right. So that's very, very interesting. So let's just suppose that Command Respect was played, and then in the reaction step, the attacking player used, let's say, a lunging press, which would increase the power by 1. The attack hits. Then in the resolution step, if there was some way for the defending hero to reduce the power of this attack by 1, which would return it to base with the trigger on the stack, then their arsenal would not be destroyed.
Correct.
The only other thing about this one in particular, the Command Respect version of this cycle, is any cards that say when this is destroyed, for example, Miraging Metamorph is the big one that I could think of, is those do not trigger unless they're in the arena when they're destroyed. So like if you have if you have a Miraging Metamorph, or if you have a Herald in the arsenal and you have, what's that? Merciful? Is it Merciful that puts...
Yeah, it's Merciful Retribution.
Yeah, then that wouldn't go into your soul either. Just to double check that. So let's move on. Shay, cover the next one.
Yeah, we're moving into the warrior category. We'll start with Parry Blade. It's a warrior weapon equipment, sword, one-handed. It has 2 power and 0 defense. Once per turn action, you can spend 1 resource to attack with it. And this gets +2 defense while defending with a weapon attack. The thing that we wanted to highlight here is that it says equipment. So it is vulnerable to equipment destruction and any rules that apply to anything to do with equipment. So something to look out for.
I mean, it's not the first, right? Because offhands also are equipped to a hand zone, and
they're equipped to hand zone. They aren't weapons. However, there is one previous weapon equipment in the form of Nitromechanoid.
Grant, how are you so smart? Like, jeez Louise. Next one. Shay, that was a short one. Do this one too.
Yeah, Shift the Tide of Battle. It's a warrior attack reaction. Comes in yellow. Costs 0 resources to play and it has 3 defense. Target warrior attack with power greater than its base gains Go Again. The next time an opposing hero is dealt damage this turn, create an agility token. Something that we wanted to highlight here was if you play Shift the Tide of Battle and the targeted attack's power becomes equal to or less than its base power, Shift the Tide of Battle will fail to resolve because the target is no longer a legal target.
So what you're saying is that there's a window for like a blinding beam or something that reduces power to basically make this card fail to resolve on the stack after resolution.
Yeah. So you can, if you can reduce the power before Shift the Tide of Battle resolves, then it would turn the effect off. But I believe if you allow Shift the Tide of Battle to resolve, then you can't remove the effect. Is that correct, Grant?
Yeah. If it successfully resolves and then the power is reduced, it will still have Go Again and will still have the next time an opposing hero is dealt damage effect. If the attack's power is reduced before it resolves, then Shift the Tide of Battle has none of its targets are still legal, so the entire layer will fail to resolve, so you'll get neither of the effects.
Excellent. So the next one up is Up the Ante. It's a warrior attack reaction. It's a blue only. It costs X resources, and it has 3 defense. It's an Olympia specialization, and it says, choose X+1. Target attack wagers an agility token with the defending hero. Target attack wagers a gold token with the defending hero. Target attack wagers a vigor token with the defending hero. Target attack gets plus Y power, where Y is the number of times it has wagered. So, a couple things that we want to highlight. First of all, just to note the difference between the Olympia specialization and the Betsy specialization. Betsy's specialization wagered 3 tokens in one wager, but this card is specifically written to allow for 3 wagers separately on one card. However, in this case, it's not optional. So Betsy's specialization said you may. This one just says target attack wagers. You can create a lot of wagers from this. One of the release notes says, in a multiplayer game, if it targets an attack that targets multiple opposing heroes like Apocalypse Automaton, then you create a wager effect with each hero for each mode with a wager chosen. So that's what? 3, if you're playing a UPF game against 3 people and you wager 3 times each, that's 9 wagers you're getting.
It's giving plus 9 power then, assuming there are no other wagers.
That is a lot of wagering. That's
Yep.
That's pretty ridiculous. Wow. One other thing that is in the release notes here is that attack reactions can only be played or activated by an attacking hero during the reaction step. So reactions in general cannot be used on allies. If Olympia could somehow create Centauri sellswords, he would not have even an opportunity to play attack reactions. This is something that I think trips people up sometimes still. With Dromai, you can't play attack reactions on her allies either.
Yeah, the key thing here is that when an ally is attacking, there isn't an attacking hero.
Okay. Grant, you want to read this one?
Sure. Next, we have Cut the Deck. It's a warrior attack reaction that comes in full cycle of colors, costs 1 resource, and has 3 defense. Target warrior attack gets plus 3/2/1 power. If it's defended by an attack action card, draw a card, then put a card from your hand or arsenal on the bottom of your deck. So, couple points we want to highlight. There is no priority in the middle of resolving a card. So after you draw a card, you cannot play any of the cards before you put a card on the bottom of your deck. If the attack is defended by an attack action card, you must put a card on the bottom of your deck if you are able to, even if you aren't allowed to even if you are not capable of drawing the card. So if you have no cards in deck before this resolves, you will still have to put a card from your hand or your arsenal on the bottom of your deck.
Yeah, it's the concept that you have to resolve as much of the effect as you can, right? Like, it's not like you can't draw the card so the entire text fails.
Correct.
Even if you can't draw, yeah.
There are possible wordings that they can do if that is their intention, primarily, and if you do.
Right. But in this case,
and that is
it's
not on
if
that.
you do. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, next card, Shay.
Jumping into Brute Guardian cards. So we're going to go with Talk a Big Game. This is a Brute Guardian action. It is blue, costs 0 resources, and has 3 defense. It reads, choose a number. The next time you deal that much or more power damage to a hero this turn, create that many might tokens. A couple of things that we wanted to highlight here was to trigger the effect, you must deal at least the chosen amount of damage in a single event, so with 1 attack. If you deal more than the chosen amount of damage, you will still only generate the amount of might tokens as the chosen number. So if you chose 5 and hit for 12, you still only get 5. And the last thing is effects that deal anything other than damage do not trigger this effect, something like arcane damage.
Yep. Yeah. The single event one is mostly. Let's go back to our Apocalypse Automaton
I was
example.
just about to.
Take a drink. Everyone drink now.
It is one of those cards that has a lot of these. So if you Apocalypse Automaton and attack two different heroes and they both block it, so let's say we'll use the example here of 5 damage. You say 5, you attack 2 people, both of them block with a single 3 defense card. They're each only taking 4. You've dealt a total of 8. However, each of those instances was only 4, so you do not get the tokens.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next card, Battered Not Broken. It's a Brute and Guardian instant. It's a red, cost 0, and it says, the next time you would be dealt damage this turn, prevent 2 of that damage. If you do, create a might token. So this is pretty straightforward, but Grant, I have a question for you. If the attacking player uses Vambrace of Determination and they're coming in with a 2-power attack, and the defending player plays Battered Not Broken, does that player take 1 damage, and do they create a might token?
If they're coming in with a 2-power attack, then yes, they will take 1 damage. And since damage was prevented, they will create a token.
Okay. So basically, the if you do refers to preventing any amount of damage.
If you prevented any amount of damage. There is one other thing I wanted to highlight for this. I'm just trying to find a name of the cards. It is so how there's a cycle of these. There's also a cycle of equipment that if you control a blank token, this gets +1 defense. If this card or the rest of its ilk are the ones that create that token for you, while the equipment will gain the defense, it will not prevent more damage from the existing attack because you've already gone past the point where the damage is calculated.
Understood. This is pretty interesting, and I don't remember this effect coming up too much in the past. If you prevent,
I believe this is these are the first if you prevent clauses.
Shay, do you want to read the next one?
Yeah. Wall of Meat and Muscle. A Brute Guardian block card. Red, 3 defense. And it reads, when this defends, if you control a might token, you may put an attack action card from your graveyard on top of your deck.
In this set, there are a cycle of cards that are blocks that have, when you defend with this, clash. If you win, create a blank token. So for those, if you defend with the one with the might token, you can stack your 2 triggers so that the clash happens first. If you win the clash, you create the token. This resolves, you get your card back.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. These are great examples so far. Really, really appreciate them. They really help sort of like understand the things that we can do with these new cards and abilities.
I think this is the first block card we've covered today. So, very important note. You cannot defend with block cards from Arsenal unless there's something that specifically allows you to. I expect, especially for players that are newer or new to seeing block cards, maybe if they didn't play, Evo Limited or anything like that, they may end up in a tricky situation with their arsenal.
To put you on the spot, Grant, I just thought of something. I think I know the answer.
Sure.
For block cards, are you playing them or just defending with them when you actually add them to the combat chain?
You are just defending with them. There's currently no way to play a block card.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Let's move into our next example. This is Mighty Windup. It's a Brute / Guardian action attack. It comes as a color cycle. It costs 3 resources, attacks for 7 at red, 5 at blue, and it defends for 2. And its text just says instant, discard this, create a might token. So the reason why we wanted to highlight this one is this has an ability that can only be activated from your hand. And in order to activate this, you just show it to all players and they pay the cost of discarding it. This is another new type of card. I think we're seeing this type of templating for the first time in heavy hitters. Is there anything wonky or anything that you wanted to highlight about cards like this, Grant?
The main thing is, as you said, it can only be activated from your hand. Basically, because the cost of this is only capable of being paid from your hand, the rules allow you to activate it in that zone. There are no other places where that can be activated, so you cannot discard it from your arsenal. You cannot discard it from the combat chain.
Yeah, or I was thinking too, like if you clash it, right, you would be revealing it.
Correct.
And
you
so
cannot discard it from there. Discard is only from your hand.
Shay, do the next one.
Yeah, it's runner, a brute warrior attack action. It comes in red, costs 2 resources, attacks for 6, and defends for 3. And it reads, when this attacks, if it has go again, create an agility token. Now to clarify, this does not create an agility token if it somehow gains go again after the attack step. So when is it considered to be after the attack step? I guess is probably what we would look for clarification.
Basically, the attack step is when all of your when this attack triggers happen. Immediately after that will be the defense step. So if a player goes to defend, then that'll be afterwards. In general, though, this wording is done for anything that can gain go again of when this attacks or when you play this. I can't think of any cards that do that with this offhand, or I guess the next attack you play gains go again would work on this. Or quicken.
If there was something like a Snapdragon Scalers that could work on this, because it wouldn't right now because this has two cost, but isn't this templating kind of the way it is? So if you could give it go again as a reaction, then you would not create an agility token because the window has passed.
Correct. The reaction step is after defending, which is after the attack step.
Right. And this is one example of that different wording from, we were discussing Sho Mercy is always checking. In this case, you check at a single point in time, which is...
Yep.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Double Down, and this one has some beefy release notes on it. So Grant, I think you should cover this one off.
Sure. Double Down. It's a Guardian/Warrior action. Only comes in red. It's 2 resources sometimes, and it has 3 defense. You may destroy a gold you control rather than pay its resource cost. The next attack that wagers this turn gets +3 power and overpower. And if a hero would create 1 or more tokens from a wager this turn, instead they create that many +1 of each of those tokens. So if you would create multiple different tokens from a single wager, example, bet big, that you'll get 1 more of each of those. So bet big will get you 2 of each of the tokens it cares about. If an attack has multiple wagers, this will apply to each of those wagers. So if you use up the ante on a card, all of those wagers will now be creating 2 tokens instead of 1. And if the replacements of replacement effects of Double Down and Ripple Away can be both applied to an effect that would create one or more tokens. The turn player chooses which one applies first. And if Double Down is applied first, you'll end up with 1 token. If Ripple Away is applied first, you'll end up with 0. This is exactly the same as the amplifying arrow example we went over previous.
So my first question is really serious. If Olympia is attacking with Apocalypse Automaton at 3 heroes, and then he plays up the ante, choosing all wagers, there's 9 wagers, and then if he had played a Double Down before that, then he's making 18 tokens. Is that right?
He would make a total of 19 tokens because he would also get his ability off his face, which is not a wager, so it will only create 1.
Wow, I can't slip anything by you. That is, you are truly a master.
So this also reads if a hero would create. So it's if you lose the wager, your opponent would create the bonus tokens.
That is correct.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a super Mordred Tide.
It is a symmetrical effect.
Okay.
And if there's multiple, if you play 2 Double Downs, you're not doubling, then doubling, you're adding +2.
Correct. Each of the effects would increase the total by 1.
Right. Somewhat complicated card, but I think this one intuitively makes sense. Let's move on to the next. So pretty simple one. Very pretty card. Balance of Justice. So it's a generic equipment head. It has 2 defense. It says instant destroy this, draw a card. Activate this ability only if an opponent has drawn 2 or more cards this turn. And it has Guardwell, which is the keyword that we covered earlier. We did want to highlight this because this is the card where the new keyword shows up. And just for a little bit more clarification, for an opponent having drawn 2 or more cards, it has to be specifically draw. You know, if your opponent searches for a card and adds it to their hand, for example, that's not a draw. You know, it very similar, I think, in my mind to the charge example as well. Like, the card has to say draw.
Yep. Sonata Arcanix will not activate this.
Oh, it's add to hand, hey? That makes sense. Okay. Next card. Shay, do you want to take this?
Yeah, it's Tenacity. It's a generic attack action. Comes in yellow. Costs 2 resources to play. It has an attack of 2 and a defense of 3. And it reads, when this attacks, it gets plus X power, where X is the number of defending cards on the combat chain. Wanted to highlight that if the number of defending cards on the combat changes after the triggered effect resolves, the value of X does not change. So it's looking specifically when it's played or defended.
It is specifically looking when it attacks. It is, yeah. The key thing here is it is a triggered ability, not a static effect.
Yeah, so it's not always checking. It's a single point in time. Okay. Ripple Away, Grant, this is a U card.
Ripple Away. Generic action attack comes in blue for 2 resources. It has 4 power and 3 defense. Instant, discard this. If an action card effect would create 1 or more tokens this turn, instead it creates that many -1 of each of those tokens. So, couple big things here. This will affect each effect of those cards that creates tokens. So if an action card would create the same token over 2 separate effects, instead it will create 1 less per effect. An example that would have been a lot more common during the Lexi period is Lace with Blood Rot followed by Infecting Shot. On hit, you have 2 separate triggered effects that will each create 1 Blood Rot token. Ripple Away says neither of those tokens are created.
Yep, that makes sense.
the other thing is the same double down and ripple away effect as previous, which is also the same as if you have something like Mordred Tide in play. Mordred Tide increases the number of rune chants created, ripple away decreases them. Of note, this isn't necessarily, they won't always apply on the same thing. For example, Viscerai's ability to create rune chants would be affected by Mordred Tide, but not the ripple away.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the ripple away only impacts action card effects, but Mordred Tide applies to all rune chant creation, including Grasp and Viscerai's triggered ability.
Is this the same example as before of the increase before decrease situation, or is it something else?
This isn't the same increase before decrease. This is the multiple players replacement effects. So turn player gets to choose which one applies first. If an event is reduced to 0, the event isn't considered to be happening anymore, so you can't be increased.
Okay.
Let's do the next one. So I'll cover this one. It's down but not out. It's a generic action attack. It comes in a full cycle, color cycle. It costs 3 resources to play. It's 5 power at red, 3 power at blue, and it defends for 3. It says, when this attacks a hero, if you have less health and control fewer equipment and tokens than them, this gets plus 3 power, overpower, and when this hits, create an agility, might, and vigor token. So the one thing that we wanted to highlight here is that there are 3 total conditions for the effect, and you have to assess each one independently. You have to satisfy all 3 conditions of having less health than the hero you're attacking, control fewer total equipment than them, and control fewer tokens than them. So if not all 3 of them are satisfied, then you don't get the 3 power, overpower, and on hit effect. It is of note that this card was initially ruled differently, as this had 2 conditions for the effect, but then it was changed in release notes to 3 conditions. And in my opinion, this is why the Oxford comma is required, and I will always use it.
No, it's good, because I know when it first came out, I think a lot of people even thought it was just like 1 condition and you summed up the life difference and the token difference. So I'm really glad that there's more clarification behind it.
Hadn't heard that interpretation myself, but yeah, there was a bunch of confusion around this. The big thing of note is it is strictly fewer of each of them. So if your opponent doesn't have any tokens, it's not active.
You know, that's a really great point, Grant, and I'm really glad that you raised it, because the card clearly says less, but sometimes as humans, we just want to ask the question, did you mean less than or equal to? Even though there's nothing that would suggest that ties would count, it's still a very natural question to ask and one to know. And I think that is it. We have gone through the entire notes here, ending on down but not out. Anything in summary? How do we feel? Are we doing okay after reviewing all of these cool cards?
I think this was one of the most technical sets, it feels like. I mean, this is the most in-depth I've ever gone through release notes, but there was a lot of points under a lot of the cards, so there's a lot of things to think about and learn here. So this was really awesome.
Yeah, the set has a lot of little nuance for how it is. I think a lot of it will become fairly easy to understand as people go. Might trip people up for the first little bit, but as a whole, I don't think it's too bad.
No. Grant, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
Was Apocalypse Automaton a mistake?
I'm not going to say it was a mistake. I think it has a lot of very interesting design space. it's made us have to rethink how we look at some parts of the comprehensive rules and some mechanics like this.
Very well said.
I'm so glad that there's people like you and your colleagues in the rules team thinking of new ways to break the game so we don't accidentally. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the JudgeHub podcast, Grant. Is there anyone that you want to shout out or give kudos to before we sign off here?
Just want to give a shout out to a couple of people on the rules team. Nick for always having her back and leading the team. Great success. Josh, without him, the CR and most of the judging stuff wouldn't be around. And everyone else on the team. Thank you all.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the JudgeHub podcast. Please stay tuned for more episodes.